Nobody would come out and say, we're going to fight this vaccine mandate. So I took the lead.
I'm now enamored with folks like yourself who said no to the jab.
Plenty of the censorship that happened, I was part of it. I was censored. I was deplatformed.
You were more right than the public health officials.
Now's the time to hold people accountable, get some transparency, get some data.
It was scripted. It was coordinated. They knew exactly how they were going to handle dissenters.
There's so many people that lost their careers and their livelihood because they didn't want to comply with something.
I am sick of losing my friends and family and the health of my community to this bullshit. It is time for us to get out there and use our voices and talk about what is happening here. I'm Nicole Shanahan. Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public. Barry Arata, thanks for joining me today here on Back to the People podcast. You're a firefighter. You are born and bred Bay Area native.
I am.
Like myself, you grew up in San Francisco, I believe, right?
The Santa Clara County. So
Santa Clara County.
San Jose area, yeah.
Okay. Not far from where I grew up. We're similar in age. And I came to be connected to you through Jay Bhattacharya,
Correct.
who's a dear friend, hopefully soon to be head of NIH. Woo.
Pulling for him. Lots of people are.
Yeah, and so I took a look at your story. You were a firefighter. You've been a firefighter for 2 decades almost, right?
Close to it, yeah.
Yeah, and you've been here in San Jose. You've have been through some of California's worst fires. We went through that period actually during the pandemic, right? There was quite a few statewide mutual aid responses that were some of the biggest campaign fires in California's history. Right. I mean, I was here for it. The sky, it was dystopian for months and months, and you couldn't go outside. It was so suffocating. But yeah, California has a fire problem. So firefighters, we need our firefighters healthy and able to be deployed and at full capacity. And so this is a role that's really important for our state in particular. And so during the pandemic, you refused the vaccine, and that is how you connected in, I believe, with the medical freedom community. Before we get into the story of what happened to you after you decided that, I'm getting to know more and more people who in 2020 and 2021 had this ability that the majority of us did not have, which was the ability to see through the bullshit.
True.
And when it was time to get the shot, rather than rushing to the shot, which is what I did, because I just believed that that was my access back into the world, and the sooner everybody got the shot, the sooner we could go back to normal, and that was commonly believed. But you were working throughout the pandemic, I understand.
That's correct.
What kind of person do you think? Because I'm now so enamored with folks like yourself who said no to the jab, who had that intellectual insight that something was not right. How did you know to do that? Like, who are you, and how does somebody who is you're a firefighter, you're not in the medical field, how do you spot an issue like that?
All great questions, and I think the question that I just heard was like, who are you, and how did I get here? And I've been a firefighter in the Bay Area for 18 years at the city of San Jose. Born and raised down in San Jose in Santa Clara County, so this is my home, and I've seen the evolution of the Bay Area, ebb and flow, and I always felt like it was a very balanced place. My background is I'm a family man. I have children. I have a wife, beautiful family, and my wife actually and I have known each other since we were kids. We grew up together.
Oh.
Kind of high school sweethearts, went away to college. I did the firefighting stuff and, just got back together. My wife she's a CPA. So she became a CPA when she was like 22 years old. She spent 13 years working in accounting and finance with biotech companies here in Santa Clara.
Hmm.
And we saw the beautiful side of, science evolving. The CEO of the company was a scientist, which in the business world was kind of difficult because he was passionate in science, and he ended up partnering with, big pharma, and they were going to blow the company up and make everybody profitable, and it was going to be great. And big pharma came in and said, "No, we're going to kind of smother you a little bit."
Hmm.
So 13 years of building and growth and fundraising,
Oh,
taking
wow.
the company public. We
Yeah.
saw the, 10, 12, 11, 13 years of FDA approval process and testing. They had an on-house,
And
biosciences
she's on the
lab.
books, so she's
Yeah,
seeing how everything runs and operates
every little
financially.
aspect of
Hmm.
the company, and it was fascinating to both of us. And then to see it just lobbied against, smushed, crushed, ended up in a fire sale, and everybody lost everything
Mm.
overnight was devastating. And it was the approval process that opened us up. I'm like, wow, that was dark.
Hmm.
But she moved on and continued in the accounting world, but in the entertainment travel space, which is a lot healthier.
Hmm.
Um, so we had that background, and okay, that's experience in life. And then when COVID was coming down the pipeline, and you were hearing that there's a coronavirus, before it was this COVID stuff, and
Right. And you had been a first responder as well for like a medical first responder.
yeah, I
Is that
spent
right?
almost 5 years working in the emergency room at Good Sam Hospital in San Jose as an ER
Yeah.
tech. That was the beginning of my career, actually right out of high school. I got into it's medically training, like emergency medical technician.
Hmm.
Foothill Junior College would offer the program. That's what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be in the fire department. You have to take steps to, get your fire training, and then you have to get medical training as well.
Hmm.
When I was working in the emergency room, I'm working around doctors, nurses, specialists, intensivists. Um, I started to see things that I'd never seen before, and it was such a fast-paced environment. It's like, whoa, I need to up my game. I need to learn more. Do I want to be a nurse? Nope. I still want to be a firefighter. How do I get there quicker? Paramedicine.
Mm.
Paramedics the next step, and it's essentially a doctor.
Yeah.
In this setting, you call 911, you're going to get a paramedic that can do intubations, intravenous medications,
Yeah.
cardiotonic stuff, cardio, shocking defibrillation, all that.
In listening to your story and thinking about some of the people I've interviewed on this show, I'm now actually seeing there is a common theme. It's individuals that have worked their way up through a medical system, and not necessarily people that went just straight into medical school, but really were on the front lines of care and saw like the human tragedy
Yeah.
up front.
We call it street medicine. I mean,
Yeah.
you really do. You're out on the streets as an EMT or a paramedic. Your career starts working on an ambulance. For me, I did a few years in Oakland, California.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's
That's
Alameda
where I'm
County.
from.
And I knew that, and I,
Hmm.
I thought I'd throw a spin on it. But being born and raised in the South Bay area, it's pretty affluent. People are healthy. You got
Yeah.
certain parts and pockets of San Jose, or certain parts of pockets of town, and people don't go to the healthcare system. Low
Mm.
socioeconomic gap. So you're going to have regions around, but Oakland acutely, it had a lot of problems. It was a great area.
Oh yeah,
Fortunately and
I saw some
unfortunately,
stuff.
I'm sure you did live
Growing
in
up,
there.
I've
Yeah,
seen all kinds of stuff, all kinds of injuries, all kinds of, uh, you know, horrible damage to the body. I mean, it's a wild, wild place,
it is.
Oakland, California.
And it'll teach you to
Yeah.
become a paramedic overnight, or an EMT overnight. And a lot of the patients were taken into Highland,
Oh
and
yes.
you're delivering, as a early 20s. I'm
Hmm.
paramedic. I have a lot of capability in
Highland
Highland.
Psychiatric
Yeah,
Facility is one of the busiest in the United States.
correct.
Yeah.
And a lot of the doctors there were Vietnam veterans.
Oh wow.
And so these men and women inside that emergency room, they learned in the field too.
Hmm.
So there was this very sympathetic environment where you're out on the streets, you're learning, you're bringing them in, you're learning from there, and then boom, it just blasted me quicker into becoming a much more rounded paramedic in a short amount of time.
Yep.
And I brought that experience to the fire service, and luckily I got hired in my hometown of San Jose.
Cool.
So I got hired in 2006 in San Jose Fire Department as a firefighter paramedic.
Yeah.
Did about 8 years in that rank, and then promoted to engineer, which is driver. And you're not a frontline paramedic, you're an EMT, which is just, you assist the paramedics. But yeah, we were there during COVID in the very beginning.
Yeah.
and we didn't know what was going on.
Hmm.
Everyone was freaking out, right? And myself included.
Your job never stopped, whereas, everybody else's jobs came to a standstill in Silicon Valley. Pretty much everyone, even hospital staffs didn't, fully come in. Like they really weaned a lot from hospital staffing.
Correct.
Operations came to a standstill. Scheduled operations, non-emergency operations came to a standstill.
Right.
But the firefighters, they never missed a beat because you can't. We're in California,
Yeah.
and there's the biggest fire seasons on the planet here. It's we're in fire season right now, so and you can feel it. You feel like you're sitting on kindling this time of year.
It's true. And I heard, I didn't read it, I haven't read it yet. I got off work this morning, but
Yeah.
I heard today was officially the end of fire season.
It is.
Yeah. So I think the
Cheers.
moisture
Thank
and
God.
relative humidity's down, and we got a big storm coming. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's the truth. We've seen wild things in California for the past decade or decade and a half, but
It's interesting. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I will say that during Trump's administration was that horrible fire season, that like unmistakable, horrible, horrendous fire season here in California. And it was very interesting because Newsom blamed it on Trump.
it's natural.
Before we get into what we're here to talk about, can we talk about that piece real quick? People were blaming that fire season on Donald Trump's management of federal lands. Is that true? I mean, did that have something to do with it, or?
That question is way over my pay grade.
Okay.
But I'd look at it from my lens, right? I'm not here to speak on behalf of the fire service or
Well, no
the
one seems to be
management
able
of
to
it.
give me an answer
And
from all pay grades.
I think the bigger thing that's frustrating is everything's become very politicized.
Everything.
Every aspect of our
Yeah.
life. And a few minutes back, I spoke to how California used to be so balanced, and it's become very one-sided. And then it's infighting, and it's this is someone else's fault. Nobody's doing anything about it to affect change. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why the networking I've done has led me here today.
Yeah.
So
Well, one of the things I'm thinking about in advance is, Trump's going to take office in a few months. And, as a Californian, are they going to politicize another fire season?
I sure hope not.
Well, let's stay on top of it, right?
Yeah.
I think this is something that we should all be socializing, because if these enormously powerful, dangerous, horrible fires are really, used as political reasons, and there's an incentive for them.
Right.
And anytime there's an incentive for anything, we have to be very vigilant as a society and call it out, because that's criminal on so many. That's truly criminal. If there's, and I don't want to say anyone is intentionally lighting things on fire for political reasons, but if they are, that is something very serious.
Yeah, we have to do something about it. And
Yeah.
I've been in the fire service for 18 years, and I work in a municipal department. San Jose is unique because we have mutual threat zones, they call them, or local response areas, where we have the eastern and the southern foothills,
Yep.
and we respond locally. I have actually never gone out on what's called like a strike team. I worked at a station in East San Jose for a few years early in my career, and we were one of the dedicated stations to go out. The whole time I was there was no campaign fire, no big statewide fire. And so I've never actually gone out to any of the wildland stuff. And so I've been lucky on that. But
Yeah.
there's a huge threat with communities that are, like, look what happened in Santa Rosa. I mean,
Yep.
that was unheard of. And there's a lot of people that are like, why? How? Wind, other things, all kinds of conspiracy theories, different parts of the state. I kind of stay out of that stuff.
Yeah.
I've already gone down enough conspiracy theory rabbit holes with COVID and other things, but
I think that goes to show your character, that you're not chasing these controversies. You're somebody who's a family man, worked really hard for your position, love your job.
100%.
And so, okay, so then let's go back to 2020, 2021. You guys, as a fire department, I assume, were asked to mask. You're probably testing endlessly before a shift is my guess. Or give me the rundown of what that was like for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I could relive it for you as quick as possible. When COVID hit, it hit San Jose pretty hard. We have a foundation called the San Jose Firefighters Burn Foundation. I think they were established in 1980, and it's out of the San Jose Fire Department, and it
Mm-hmm.
supports Valley Medical Center, who has one of the better burn units on the West Coast. And so this foundation has an annual gala for fundraising, and it's a lot of firefighters go. I was not added in particular. Um, there happened to be a pretty significant COVID outbreak that no one knew about that possibly came from there, or we had patient zero in San Jose, so there was
Oh,
a
wow.
lot happening in San Jose overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So as COVID was like becoming known across the nation and globally, it hit our workforce very hard. And we had, I can't give you exact numbers, but it was, probably over 50 people at one point in the very beginning that were out. We had some people very sick with it.
Yeah.
And it was, flip a switch. Let's go into creating a mode in an environment where we're going to isolate, we're going to shut it down. Shelter in place was brewing. We have PPE, we have training, we have masks, we have gowns, we have glasses. We're trained to do these things
Mm-hmm.
going into getting a job with the fire department. You already have that training and education. And then we do continuous training about it, weapons of mass destruction, how to respond to these
Oh,
things,
interesting. I didn't know that.
contagion,
Yeah.
disease control. And, I was kind of behind the scenes. I was recovering from a snapped Achilles. And so I was kind of on a desk job at the time. And I'll never forget the day that we found out one of our guys was critically ill in the hospital. He had gone home
From COVID?
from COVID. And that's,
Huh.
it was like, uh-oh, what do we do? So it hit within 2 days. It was like, okay, shut everything down. And, this was then the first week or so of March of 2020. We had plenty of gloves, plenty of gowns, plenty of N95 masks. We actually, a lot of people don't talk about this, but the P100 mask is, it's a huge filter mask. It's made for these events. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're wearing them, we're doing well. And COVID sent everybody home. We shut it down. The Bay Area started out of Santa Clara County, shelter in place happened. And it was like tumbleweeds up until probably, I don't know, April or May.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody was at home. No one was out at the restaurants. You remember this place was a ghost town.
Yeah, I remember. But you guys still
We're
had people
still,
coming
yeah.
in every day.
Yeah, and I'll
Yeah.
say this: I don't have the numbers, and it's not my place to speak on it. But call volume went down. I mean,
Call volume went
call
down.
volume went down drastically. No one was calling 911. Everyone was at home. Everyone was afraid to go to the hospital. The hospitals were empty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have family that works at Stanford,
Mm-hmm.
and numbers were down. And I mean, everybody really truly sheltered in
Did
place.
you guys have any COVID related deaths?
In the fire department?
Yeah.
No, not in San Jose.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the one that became critically ill rebounded, did
Yeah, and
okay.
We had a few people that they went
That
through
got pretty sick
their personal
early on.
experiences, and
Mhm.
I'm not going to speak for them, but I know that
Yeah.
people have had residual,
Long
health
COVID.
issues, long COVID, such. But
Yeah.
the science behind COVID was real, and it harmed and affected a lot of people. It took a lot of lives. And at the times we were out on the front lines responding to all these calls.
I think it's really important to remember that bit, because in the aftermath of it, there's people are just very angry and skeptical, and they're like, it was just a bad cold. But at the time, people were getting pretty sick early on with it.
True.
Hospitalizations, not like it was immediately killing them, but they got very, very ill, some. So that's what, again, I think that framing's really important, because I don't want, anyone listening, or I don't want it to become thematic that this wasn't something unusual, right? There was a variant that was making people very sick, but was the response and the mandate proportionate, and how disproportionate was it actually? And so I think this is why we have to relive these case studies in our head
Absolutely.
from these perspectives, because people are like, well, we can, promise us there aren't going to be mandates again. Say Operation Warp Speed was a failure. Like there's a lot of pressure for all of that kind of talk right now. And I think in order for us to get to a place of really understanding what was done right and what was done wrong, we have to talk about it proportionally.
Correct. And we have to have a seat at the table with everybody. Everybody has to go. The dust has settled.
Right.
And you just said it. What went right? What went wrong? What will we never do again?
Mm-hmm.
How will we treat it differently?
Yeah.
And that's why I continue to be involved and continue to advocate. And there's just so much going on, and it's a breath of fresh air. There's a lot of people that aren't happy about it, but free speech has been
Yeah.
revived. Thank you to Elon, and plenty of the censorship that happened. I was part of it. I was censored. I was deplatformed.
Well,
My
let's get to
voice,
that
yeah,
part because right now the things that you've described are, you know, you saw people get sick, things were locking down, you were doing your job, but you guys were prepared. Now let's get to the part of the story around when you start speaking up and calling stuff out. So, what was the first thing that you noticed that was inconsistent?
yeah. I want to touch on one quick story about this, and this was at the
Yeah.
very forefront of COVID, as there was a buzz going on before COVID was official. Like
Hmm.
there was people that knew something was coming out of Wuhan, China. There was some type of plague or sickness or illness that was coming, and I caught wind of it probably a month or two before it actually happened, and
How?
some colleagues that were connected to some pretty big medical establishments that, we live in an affluent area. There's a lot of people in the tech industry. There's a lot of people in venture capital. There's a lot of people that know a lot of people here.
I mean, I heard about it when it was in Australia in end of January.
Correct.
Hmm.
And, funny thing is my wife was on a business trip to LA in
Hmm.
the beginning of January, and she came back. I said, every time you go down to LA, you come back with some nasty cold. She
Hmm.
came back with a bad one, and it hit a couple of our kids. We didn't know what it was. They went to the doctor. No, it's probably just the flu. It's a bad respiratory virus. And it lasted with a couple of my daughters and my wife between 2 and 4 weeks.
Hmm.
We think it was COVID. We don't know because there wasn't really any way to test it back then. In fact,
Hmm.
the doctors didn't even want to test for it. But
Hmm.
going into kind of COVID ramping up, like, well, something's not right. I started networking with a couple of people. Um, I know a couple people in some high places in Santa Clara County that, I've worked with over the term of my career. And we
Yeah.
started talking about how are we going to mitigate this? We're going to start shutting things down. How are we going to keep people from flooding the hospitals? Because there's 11 hospitals in Santa Clara County, emergency
Yep.
rooms. How are we going to stop it from taking over hospitals, from spreading? And it's like, how are we going to, how are we going to put a block on this from happening and spreading very rapidly? And we came up with this crazy idea. And these are people that have done these practices, have studied medicine, have been in the emergency medical services world their whole career.
Hmm.
And it was like Levi Stadium. Let's find a place where we can triage. You call 911.
Hmm.
You got symptoms of a respiratory virus that could be COVID. We're going to take you and isolate you over here. We're going to do a MASH style hospital.
Hmm.
And it was like humongous parking lot. You can have mild, moderate, severe patients, and that's what we do in the medical world is we
Well, there
triage
were
people.
some of those big tents set up
This was
around.
before all that happened. So
Right.
I was working behind the scenes to figure out how to network with folks, and it happened so fast. And it was, okay, let me call somebody that's going to call somebody. And next thing you know, it was like, I think the Niners are going to release the stadium rights. We got to talk to Santa Clara. They're going to do it. So there was a lot of things I was involved in very early on as COVID was building up. And
Hmm.
not too many people know the story. At the same time, the city of Santa was ramping up emergency operations center,
Hmm.
right? And so there was 40, 50, 60 people. It became a national program. The team that I work with, I'm honored to be around really good people that are part of FEMA.
Hmm.
The administration of the city was involved. It was fascinating to see how quick we spun up this emergency response plan. At the same time, I was doing things kind of rogue on the side, and I had to come clean and say, "Hey, I've got some people I've been talking to. They're talking about turning the Niners Stadium into a makeshift hospital. Nurses and doctors can stay there. They can use the locker rooms." It was a big ordeal. So I saw a lot of really good things happening.
Hmm.
I was told, "Hey, thanks for telling us about this. You lit a big fire. Good job. Now step aside."
Hmm.
And for me, it was like, well, I've been involved in some pretty heavy stuff. Like we just pitched something to the board of supervisors for Santa Clara County and to get it to the public health. And of course, within a day or two, it was like shelter in place.
Right.
Forget that idea. No. And it was like, wow, we just spent a few weeks, maybe month and a half
And
putting
these
this
were like
together.
more federal mandates of like, you came up with a local idea.
Yeah, it was like a
on
local
how you
response
a
idea.
local response, and then the federal response came in and said, "No, we're not doing that."
Well, it came from our local public health office in Santa Clara County, but then,
But they're getting their information from
yeah,
the
they were getting
national
it from the
state.
federal level,
Yeah.
and it just immediately was like, okay, I stepped aside and I went, all right, I'll just keep doing the desk job, healing the Achilles. March, April, May, we ran out of gloves, we ran out of N95 masks, we ran out of gowns. There was there was a shortage across the country, across the globe, and it was
Mhm.
like, well, there's an endless supply of money to buy things, but you can't buy things. The
Mhm.
price of gloves went, I don't know, 10x for a box of gloves. So we were running out of stuff, and it was like we were still responding. And then by April, May, the call volume shot up through the roof. I mean, everyone was home. No
Mhm.
one was on the freeways except for people that were probably drinking and driving, doing drugs, doing 160 miles an hour. And
Mhm.
it got wild, and it became like the wild, wild west. May of 2020 happened. We had a
Mhm.
huge, civil rights movement happening.
Yep.
Cities were burned to the ground. San Jose was impacted. Freeways were closed. I mean, it was just crazy. It was crazy times. And it was like almost like, well, you don't need a mask to go to a protest.
Right.
Thousands of people can show up unmasked. COVID's gone. And my mind was kind of blown.
So that was that your first indication of there's something going on here that does not make sense?
Yeah. And I saw some things before, but that was a big one for me. It
Right.
was like, oh, okay. All of a sudden, social distancing doesn't matter. We can stand shoulder to shoulder and riot against the defund the police. And, it was
Mhm.
crazy. I mean, this was just a few years ago, and it's almost like we've forgotten what happened.
The timeline, a lot of people can't remember the timelines
I don't think they
because
want
it
to.
was so traumatic.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember vividly like the first week or two, and then it just gets blurry
Yeah.
for me.
The thoughts I hold on to is riding around in the middle of the day with my
Mhm.
kids on bikes and hiking. That was fascinating. The amount of family time we all spent together, I saw it across
Right.
all communities. Everyone was
People
happy.
love that, yeah.
They loved it.
And I remember how happy people reported their pets were because the pets were like, "You're home all day with me."
Yeah. Everybody
And
was
the
doing good
kids were
things together.
pretty happy. The kids were pretty happy in like the first week or two, and then it got harder. And as they restricted outdoor access, it got really hard.
Yeah. The kids not being in school started to take a toll on everybody. And I think
Yep.
after a few months, families were like, okay, we need a break from each other. But
Yeah.
I was embracing it. I loved it.
It was interesting. It's interesting you say BLM was the first sign that the way things were being handled federally were not in line with some of the principles that they were enforcing
True.
in other places, like the stay-at-home orders for pretty much everything else other than BLM.
Yeah. I mean, Santa Clara County had a 150-mile maximum radius you could go. Right. So technically, if you lived in Santa Clara County,
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't go to Yosemite.
Mm-hmm.
Other people could, but you couldn't. And it was, I saw the disparity in what San Mateo County wanted to do versus Santa Clara County
Mm-hmm.
versus San Francisco versus Marin versus LA. And I just was like, this is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of checked out. And I continued to
Yeah.
do my job. I continued to live my life. And I said, you know what? COVID's real. Eventually, probably everyone's going to get it. I heard a vaccine was in the works. I tried
Mm-hmm.
not to pay attention to. There was a lot of negativity going on through the summer of 2020.
Yep.
I traveled by car. We did road trips. It was fascinating.
You were one of the families that did it well. There are some families, especially here in Silicon Valley, that were too afraid to go anywhere
It's true.
for well over a year. I mean, to the extent that you still hear of stories where people are afraid to go out around here because
Yeah,
of COVID
I
risk.
think I don't have a degree in psychology,
Hmm.
but I've studied it acutely. Again, I'm more of a guy that learns from the streets and experience, but the psychology of what happened around here was actually mind blowing.
Speaking of, have you seen a lot of mental health crisis?
Oh, I, I don't know numbers, but I could say mental health, mental, physical, and emotional health
Hmm.
is at like an all time low right now. We're just not happy. We're not healthy, and I know that acutely it's around here in the Bay Area. I mean, people appear happy,
Hmm.
but I know a lot of folks around here, and there's people
Yeah.
that, we're deeply affected by this.
When you're a first responder, so, or,
It affects our community
yeah.
immensely. And, going through COVID, everyone bonded together very well. The
Mm-hmm.
teamwork, everyone had kind of have a difference of opinion. And
Mm-hmm.
the politics of our nation
Yeah.
really affected everybody. There was a lot of tension building.
Yeah.
And, in the fire service, we're really good at checking our, politics, religion, ego, personal beliefs when we show up, because we have a service to provide and
Mm-hmm.
we have to be on the same page.
Yeah.
We have to get along. We have to have fun. We have to joke through dark times. And the division, you could see it. It was palpable.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of watched it. I'd been on a while, and, leading into the fall and winter of 2020,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people had COVID.
Right. Yeah. And so your station was one of the first to actually receive access to the vaccine.
Yeah, I remember the first few weeks of December. It was show up to work, hey, and I drive, right? And it was like they really can't go anywhere without me. So
Mm-hmm.
it was like, hey, let's all jump in the rig. That's what we call it. It's an engine or a truck. But it's like, jump in the rig. We got to go down to the fairgrounds. It's like, oh, what are we doing? Some training? And they're like, no, we're going to get the vaccine. And I said, what vaccine? And they're like, the COVID-19 vaccine. And I was like, I kind of chuckled, right? I was like, well, I mean, I'll give you a ride down there, but I don't even know what I'm getting. I haven't heard the name of it. I'm showing up to work and you're telling me I'm going to go get. So I sat in the rig outside while everybody waited in this long line, filling out paperwork
Mm-hmm.
at the Santa Clara County Fairgrounds. And
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not even going to touch the subject right now. I need to know a little bit more about what's going on.
Right. They sent all the first responders there for
Yeah.
that shot.
And there was a shortage too. There was
Yeah.
some of us were showing up and they were turned away.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this, it became like
People were incredibly compliant in this area.
very compliant, which is fine. And I'm okay with that. Hey, everybody has a choice. And
Yeah.
for me, it was like my choice is to sit back and watch this kind of unravel.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't done my research yet. And so I'm very like pragmatic on that. I want to know what's.
Have you had somebody hurt before by vaccines? Like why did you feel it was necessary to research it when everyone around you was getting it? And when the government was telling you it was safe and effective, and it was being heralded as this breakthrough, wonderful, magnificent American moment.
I think there's a lot of answers to that question. First, I don't have anyone personally in my family that's, vaccine injured that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a very healthy family, fortunately. Genetics and hereditary stuff is minimal on both sides of my family. I'm not against vaccines. I have vaccines. My kids are vaccinated. This one for me was like, I didn't know anything about it. I just wanted to learn more.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I saw the good and the bad and the ugly of COVID before the vaccine came out, and the politics that played out, and
Mm-hmm.
the pressure and the government telling you what to do, what not to do. Some people were okay to not wear masks at rallies, some weren't. It was just, I kind of saw through the bullshit, and I said, you know what? I'm just going to sit back and watch it until
You're like, they know a lot less than they claim to know.
yeah.
So
And
that was the vibe, right? You were taking a look around and you're like, this is all coordinated in a very interesting way. There's tons of inconsistencies. I don't know what to believe here. I'm just showing up, doing what I got to do every day. And, and you're probably disagreeing with some of the things that you're seeing.
yeah, that's true. And, again, going back to my wife being in pharmaceuticals for 13 years, it was like, this happened way too quick. So what did I do? I consulted a few people that I trusted, some of which I told you, Operation 49ers, like, let's find a way to, the vaccines weren't out yet. How are we going to help people? And it was a respiratory illness. We knew that it was going to take out the vulnerable, obese, diabetes, a lot of underlying health conditions, the elderly. So it was, hey, you have to get this vaccine because it's going to stop you from getting it, and it's going to stop you from transmitting it.
Right.
It's going to protect you, and it's going to protect everyone else.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, not today. I need some time. Fill out this paperwork, declining. And I was like, I'm not declining. I said, I just don't want it right now. And so it was like this, they made me fill out this piece of paperwork, and I'm sign it. And I said, here you go. Like, I decline to get this. I can get it at a later date. And it was like, wow, that was intense. And I saw everybody fighting to go get it. Good. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to hold off again. And so that was December of 2020. And I've always been I'm a fourth generation union blue collar worker in the San Francisco Bay Area. I believe in, labor rights and the labor movement. I've tried to stay out of politics my whole life. This thing got very political, and it was like people were getting labeled for not wanting to voluntarily get something. It was not a mandate.
Did you get labeled?
Oh boy. But I have thick skin. And so I kind of took it on the chin, and it was like funny, ha ha.
So they tracked you down from that moment? I mean, so you just hit decline, you turn in the paperwork, but like, are they then receive that paperwork, it has your name on it says decline,
right,
and it gets flagged.
Which is a medical privacy violation in California, right? It should be between myself and my practitioner. We have those freedoms in California. And there was no mandate, but it was like all of a sudden people were joking, like anybody that doesn't get it's crazy. And I was a little bit vocal. I have no problem being vocal and standing up for myself and joking through it.
Yeah.
And it was like, hey, union buddies, like executive board members who are our own brothers and sisters, like we work alongside each other. They also represent us. What's going on? Hey, if you don't want to get it, don't get it. It's never going to be mandated. They can't do it. It's unconstitutional, and it was like, okay, well, more and more folks in the Bay Area were getting it, right? The numbers were ticking. I don't know what was going on really around the rest of the country at the time because I wasn't really affected by it. I wasn't being forced to do something. And then I got COVID in June, July of 2021. And I didn't even know I had it. And it was like I had like a tickle in my throat.
Right.
I felt a little tired, and I was out camping. And after a week driving home, I was like, I need some coffee to make it home on this road trip. And I couldn't taste the coffee. And I was like, And I asked my wife, like, hey, can you taste this coffee? And she's like, I can't taste it either. And so, you're tired. And it's like, I didn't, I don't feel irresponsible for this because I already had all the signs and symptoms. Testing was a thing, but it wasn't.
Had the shot were getting COVID too. So I don't think you should, in retrospect, feel bad about any of it.
That is true. I believe it was like April, I don't want to quote anybody on this, but I know some people, like you mentioned, we both know Jay Bhattacharya, and there were people kind of screaming from the rooftops, like, this isn't stopping infection and it's not preventing transmission, or stopping transmission. It's not stopping infection. And the narrative changed. But it's decreasing the symptoms. And I knew that this vaccine was designed quickly, and it was for people that had high risk categories. And, there's a lot of people like Jay with the Great Barrington Declaration that said, like, we should isolate the most vulnerable and let everybody else live their lives. It's going to just spread. It's going to go. And there was a lot of people screaming that's irresponsible. I tried to stay neutral and say, I just don't want to get it. And then I was like, I had COVID. I recovered. Like, I've got some built up immunity. There's some science behind that. And then by like mid-July, it was mandates coming down the pipeline. And I was like, what? This is crazy. The union said this is never going to happen. There's nothing we can do about it, I was told. And I'm like, whoa, like, wait a minute. And I'm like, shit, am I the only one? Am I the only one in my entire department?
Were you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going around asking people about their personal belief systems. I wasn't asking them about their private medical stuff.
Yeah.
People knew that I hadn't gotten it yet because I was vocal. I was like, I'm not ready to get it. And then I was like, dude, I already had COVID. And so the pressure just went from like, I don't know, 15% pressure to like.
Where do you think the pressure came from at your department?
Everywhere.
Oh.
It came from my coworkers, my administration, my union, city administration, Santa Clara County Public Health Office, my neighbors, the schools. It came from everywhere. So the pressure, I'd never felt pressure like this before.
Wow.
The coercion kicked in, the harassment.
What kind of harassment?
Just, if you want to be a kook and kill yourself and us, and you don't deserve to be a fireman anymore.
People would say that to your face?
Yeah, and a lot behind my back because I got a lot of friends, and I'd hear like, hey, so-and-so, yeah, well, they're misguided, they're misinformed. And I just, at that point, it was like I dug my heels in and I started to like really do my research. Like, what are my options?
Mm.
So I started working with the union, our, executive board members, and hey, we gotta stop this. This is unconstitutional. Well, the lawyers are saying that it isn't. And it was like, what do you mean? Like, they can advise all they want. That's what lawyers do. They advise you on making a decision. And then I started asking around, and then I started hearing other people in the department were becoming mentally unstable over this. They're like, I'm not getting this. I knew I had religious beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
personal beliefs, morals, ethics. I believe in constitutional freedoms and rights. And when I'm seeing all these other people not want to do something, they're like, I stood up and said, that's it. I said, the division, the hatred, the polarization that's happening has to stop. I was able to get the message through the executive board to the membership.
Mm-hmm.
Stop harassing each other, stop discriminating, stop coercing each other.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should have a right. But nobody would come out and say, we're going to fight this vaccine mandate.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the lead.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately realized it was the same playbook up and down the state of California and across the country. And then, firefighters from Honolulu to Chicago to FDNY to LA to San Francisco to Oakland to Tampa, Florida, Orange County. I mean, all over the country, Seattle. We networked through Telegram, of all places. I'd never
Wow,
even
you
been on
guys use
Telegram. I didn't even know what it
Telegram.
was. And it was like, hey, here's a
Interesting.
platform where we can all talk. And it was like,
And you all found each other.
we all found each other and we didn't know each other. Some people knew somebody that knew somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And the common thread was it's the exact same playbook in every big metropolitan city across the country. And it became very political.
On how to deal with, quote, anti-vaxxers.
Yeah. And it was how to mandate them, how to terminate them, how to
provide alternative accommodations.
Well, they called it reasonable accommodations, which was completely unreasonable, if you ask me. It was, okay, if you didn't get the vaccine, you can apply for an exemption, medical, religious exemption. And, my city was turning them all down. And I was the guy leading the charge. Hey, everybody put these in. It grew from the fire department in San Jose to the police department,
Mm-hmm.
to the airport, to finance, to, public works,
Mm-hmm.
parks and rec. And there was, it was hard to get numbers because everybody acted like they didn't know who was, we don't know how many people are unvaccinated or who declined to state. But we were roughly working with like 1,000 employees in the city of San Jose at the beginning of it.
Wow.
And the pressure of it, a lot of people just said, I'm going to give in. They didn't even put up a fight. I can't fight this. This is too stressful. And they gave in. A lot of people gave in against their own will.
They
their own
just gave
belief
in
systems.
and took the shot.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say that it's because they made their own choice and they folded.
Look,
and they didn't
I
want
know
to.
that pressure. I know that pressure as a mom, right?
Right.
And it's hard to describe the feeling that is projected. It's you have a total normal reason, logical process of saying, I've researched this. I don't need the vaccine, right? Just the same way we can refuse the flu vaccine.
Correct.
And it's normal. It is so normal to refuse or just not even think about it. Like, there's a flu. It's awful. Yes, the flu kills some people, but I'm not going to get the flu vaccine this year. No biggie.
Right.
And so then you go out there with that mindset, and all of a sudden people are like, you didn't get the flu vaccine?
Yeah.
And that, how weird would that be if you were ostracized for not getting the flu vaccine and like every single organization and institution around you started to call you this pejorative of you're an anti-vaxxer, you're anti-science, you're dangerous, you're selfish.
You're making me vulnerable to get sick.
Yeah.
Wait, if the vaccines are effective,
You're a murderer.
it doesn't matter. You got it. You're protected. You have immunity.
Yes.
And that's where we ended up.
Yeah, it's wild to go from being like, this is normal not to do that, and everyone, and it's like a block of people, right? All looking at you as if you're this outside, like, you know, it's how I imagine they treated leprosy,
Right.
in the 50s. And you're an outcast.
Completely. And that's how quick it happened.
Yeah.
And you brought up a really good point that I want to make sure I hit home on is we've never been mandated to take the flu vaccine in my line of work. It's always an option to opt out and you can decline to get it. And it's always offered at a later date. And even I think it was like the winter of 2017, 2018, there was a really bad influenza in California, but in Santa Clara County,
Yeah.
it was a very bad respiratory driven flu. And I know some people in the right places that basically said, are we going to mandate the flu vaccine? And, don't quote this, but the public health office was like, no, we can't mandate a vaccine. And then the tides turned in, late 2020, 2021, and mandated an EUA vaccine.
Well, the
And
precedent is the mandate of childhood vaccines to go to school. I mean,
true.
that's where it all started.
Right.
And it always does. It always starts with the schools. And it always
It's
starts
a lot of
with
work to
the
be
kids.
done there. Yeah. And let me ask you, how many children do you have?
I have one, and I do believe that she has sensitivities. And I do believe she was vaccine injured. I do believe I was vaccine injured at one point many years ago by the HPV vaccine, because there's no way the response I had is considered normal. It was such a severe adverse reaction. And then I had such a severe adverse reaction to the Moderna COVID vaccine. And, you try to explain to people that like you felt like bad to the point where it was scary, right? Immobile, like fevers, like visuals, delusions, headaches, pain beyond imagination. And you try to explain this to your doctor, and your doctor's just like, yeah, it's normal. Some people, that first like 24 hours, 48 hours can be a little
Right.
rough. No, this is more than a little rough. People were having extreme reactions to this shot and put through a great deal of suffering, and it was brushed aside as like, this is normal. This is what you should be experiencing. Don't worry.
Yeah. And you're correct on that. And
Yeah.
that reminds me is another reason why I was reluctant is so many people at work were going and getting this in December, January, February.
Yeah, you
The
can't go to
COVID
work the
vaccine.
next day
No.
after.
They told us we had to do it on duty.
Whoa.
And they wanted you to do it your first day at duty. And we work 48-hour shifts. So you're there for 2 days straight.
Yeah.
And I remember everyone's getting it and they're going down like flies. And I'm sitting there going, in my mind, I'm like, oh shit, they all have COVID. This is crazy.
Yeah.
I'm watching 4, 6, 8 of my colleagues, their arms are killing them.
Yeah,
They're
the
super
soreness.
tired.
Yeah.
I mean, they're sleeping for 12, 14 hours, barely getting up for calls. Guys are going to fires and fatiguing. I'm thinking, this is not normal. And they did a great job. They got the fire service first. I go, what are they doing here? What's going on? Oh, the military's going to get it. Oh, all the people that America looks up to, the fabric of society, is getting this, and it's fine. And don't worry, this is the side effects of the vaccines is you're going to be laid out for a couple of days.
Right. These are our toughest guys that are getting laid out for days.
Man, and it just blew my mind. And they bounce back quick, and they're like, okay, well, I'm immune now. In 21 days, I'm going to go get another one. And I'm like, this is wild. And so that was, you jaunted that memory inside of me. It was like, yeah, people, I'm not here to speak on science because I'm not a scientist. It's not my lane, but I know I'm connected to the network of people that can speak on this. So the subject matter experts, and I'm going to let them do their job. This is all the truth will come out.
So is that how you got connected with the medical freedom community and Jay Bhattacharya?
Yeah.
Did you reach out to him, or did he find you, or how did this all come to be? Like, when did it boil over?
Yeah, I connected with Steve Kirsch.
Here
locally. And Steve has a platform, and he's a strong advocate for something's not right here.
Yeah.
And he has nothing to lose. He's been supporting, funding, advocating, and he's been completely censored and shut down. No one will listen to him.
I
And
mean, Steve was a very successful inventor and computer scientist,
is the optical
involved in the
mouse
optical mouse, the development of the optical mouse. And I heard rumors of Steve, but I had never like really dug into his work. And then Bobby Kennedy connected me with him when I
excellent.
joined the campaign. And I've never met anyone so laser focused
Yes,
on this vaccine issue, uh, and was on it. I think before COVID, like he was just looking at the numbers statistically on adverse reactions to childhood vaccines. I think, and was seeing statistical relevance
correct.
that is undeniable. And so when you're a statistician and you are looking for signal in a population study, you can collect your first sample even within your own immediate communities. You can get signal just looking at the people around yourself, your kids, your spouse, your church,
Right,
your place of work. And so he's very left brain.
right,
So he's very mathematical. And for him, those signals were just far too obvious and far too powerful to ignore. And so then he goes in and he starts seeing more and more signal that these adverse reactions are far more prevalent than are being reported. And I think when he took that information, which any logical person would do, right? You would take it to an expert who is like in public health and policy.
correct.
And he kept taking it to people and he just had doors slammed in his face.
Right,
And then he worked even harder to then put together more data models, present those with even stronger signal.
true.
And he would then say, okay, I did the work. Here you are. There's something here, another door in his face.
And the deadbolt. Psh,
Yeah,
don't come
deadbolt.
back.
And then the next thing we know, there's rumors of Steve going around that he's lost his mind,
Right,
that he's become fixated. And then he's like, well, now I really got to prove it. So then he goes out and gets even more data. And so like, this has been Steve Kirsch's life.
yeah,
And I love the guy for his commitment to this. And it is true. Like this culture that we're living in around vaccines, the fact that you cannot have these conversations is driving a lot of really smart people crazy. It's
yeah.
like,
It's exhausting them, and
it's exhausting and it's
fatiguing.
infuriating.
It is frustrating.
Yeah.
And they've done a great job. I say they like.
And I don't want to say
society.
crazy in like a bad way, but it's like when you are somebody so committed to the truth and logic and science and the scientific method and data and statistics, when you're somebody who is committed to these things and they have served you well your entire life,
Correct.
and all of a sudden you come out and you use that exact same methodology, which has always worked for you around vaccines, and you see things shift around you almost overnight as if it's like a bad dream,
Right.
it will actually, I think, cause a sense of almost like this out of body terror of like what happened to my reality.
And so like getting connected to that medical freedom movement, like I knew it was out there,
Yeah.
but it wasn't my wheelhouse. And then COVID opens it up. The vaccine mandate opens it up. And, I said we connected with firefighters across the country, and San Francisco firefighters were on the chopping block, San Jose, Oakland, Los Angeles, San Diego, just here in California. Then there were some agencies that weren't at all. It was like, no, you don't have to get vaccinated. Like San Mateo County, all of their whole county, fire service, EMTs, paramedics, it's your choice. It's like, wait, there's an imaginary line here where it's your choice and it's not. It was like weird. So LA City Fire Department, a big, large group of them were, no, we're not doing this. And they had strength in numbers. Up here in the Bay Area, like our strength in numbers were dwindling to where it was like, well, you're the small minority and we're going to let you go or you're going to be suspended. And this movement happened where it was like, okay, people listen to firefighters. They respect us. We're really good people. And there's not many of us in America, roughly 325,000 of us are paid, sworn career firefighters across the country. And we're all in the same union. International Association of Firefighters. Is like, we need to create our own little group to advocate. And out of LA came Firefighters for Freedom, huge
Oh.
national movement. I commend them. They organized very well. FDNY started Bravest for Choice. Everybody had their own brand. It was like, so the resistance started.
Did you find Steve Kirsch or did Steve Kirsch find you?
So once I networked with firefighters in LA, they
Yeah.
helped us organize up here. I created a nonprofit.
And this is all through Telegram?
This
Because
is
X was censoring.
there was the Instagram was done.
Yeah, you couldn't connect. You
Twitter at the
couldn't
time
find
was
people on
done.
Facebook.
Nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
so I learned about
Or
Telegram.
it wasn't X, it was Twitter then, yes.
Yeah, I learned about Telegram real quick, and I was like, "Ooh, what is this?" Like, I don't need any more platforms on my phone. And we ended up creating American Frontline Workers for Freedom, and that was out of the city of San Jose employees, and it was going to be firefighter specific, right? Because we work well together, we're on the same kind of communication system, but can't leave the cops behind. The
Yeah.
rest of America is already doing that at the time, right? We're defunding the police, like our brothers in blue. We need them. Oh, there's all these other people. So instead of branding it firefighter specific, it was like Frontline Workers for Freedom. And, I was one of the founders. There was, 7 to 9 of us that came from different walks of the city. And it quickly, Telegram just blew up. And, you start hearing about Peter McCullough. And then Jody O'Malley, an RN out of Arizona. I don't know if you met her. She was the first Project Veritas
Yes, I've
whistleblower.
seen her on X.
You got to meet her. She's beautiful. Like I talked to her. So I'm reaching out to these people on Telegram. I don't
Yeah.
even know them. And next thing you know, I've got people's phone numbers and connecting with so-and-so. And the network just grew. And it was like,
Wow.
we're all the crazy ones. And I was like, okay, well, at least I got a group of crazy people that we can go buy an island together if we get kicked out of the country. That's kind of where the joke started. And it was difficult.
Yeah.
We met lawyers, we met this, we met that. Steve Kirsch.
It's almost like the re-founders of civilization.
Yeah. And it was, I actually have read more in the past 3.5, 4 years than I have in my entire life. I'm a very quick person. I like a lot of action. I move fast. I read, and then it's like, oh, I got to go do something else. I got to finish this. And I've been trying to slow it down, read a lot more, a lot of data. There's opposing data. There's dissenting opinion. The censorship was real. And so it was very hard to speak out in the community. My kids were affected by it, living in Santa Clara County, the school systems. And it was hard to stand against. It's like David versus Goliath. It's very difficult, but I'm happy and proud that we did it.
Well, you guys all found each other. I mean, I think that's been the thing that has been unexpected from the powers that be, that such a small group of people would be able to hold out and find each other and consistently overcome every attempt to be silenced. So I think that, I oftentimes look back and I think about where, public policy overplayed its hand.
Correct.
And, certainly the speed by which they rolled out mandates and the handling of anti-vaxxers, how coordinated it was.
It was very well coordinated.
So it was scripted, it was coordinated. They knew exactly how they were going to handle dissenters, how they were going to keep the voices separated from one another, how they were going to keep stories of adverse reactions silenced, and how to keep those stories separated from each other.
Right.
This was incredibly well designed.
Yeah. Well, it was planned.
Folks like you weren't supposed to get this far, keep your jobs, form your organizations, help elect the current president, who then brought on Robert F. Kennedy to be HHS
Thank God.
to expose all of this. I mean,
Yep, it's a blessing.
And it really did come from that tiny little seed of folks like you seeing those inconsistencies and not giving in to them. Because for some reason, you were just born more stubborn than the rest of us.
That's definitely in my DNA, as everyone that knows me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think very hard about it because people around me are suffering from all kinds of health issues right now. my closest friend in the whole world just had to have a biopsy done. And, it's really hard watching the pain. And, we can't show conclusively, although there are many people out there who have come up with very, very convincing theories around the COVID-19 vaccine causing a lot of these underlying issues.
Yeah, and I think, as I continue to advocate, we've got our
Hmm.
nonprofit. It's apolitical.
Yeah.
Firefighters for Freedom is a national, movement that's happened, and the energy has come and gone. There's still the core people that founded these groups
Hmm.
that are fighting for change, that are running for, executive
Hmm.
board positions in their own unions to
Good.
bring balance. The Medical Freedom Network has exploded.
Yeah.
Now we know, you know people, I know people. We
Hmm.
have personal relationships with people that are going to be in the next administration,
Hmm.
and we can't look at it from red versus blue, left
Yeah.
versus right. It has to be this bipartisan, drop the
Right.
gloves. Let's analyze some data.
Well,
Let's
let's
be
see if
proactive
there's
in
interventions
interventions. Let's
that
look at
we
what's going
can
on.
look at. I mean, I was just talking to Senator Ron Johnson
Okay.
yesterday. I mean, that guy's a total
He's
hero.
sharp.
He's sharp. He is such a hero, and he gets not enough credit for what
Mm-mm.
he has done. And he's on the Senate Intelligence Committee as well. And so he has like special insights. But I was just talking to him yesterday. I was asking him about, has he been able to convince anybody that he was right all along?
The tides are
And
turning, and people are listening. People at the
yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm behind the scenes on some resolution, legislative change that we've been building. It started with the grassroots approach of firefighters.
Hmm.
There's a group down in Southern California called PERC, Parental Educational Rights for Kids.
Hmm.
Amy Bond is the lead of that. These lawyers that we used for our lawsuit in Santa Clara County and San Jose that unfortunately had to go through so many pain points. We didn't appeal them. They're dead in the water. That the legal fight around here was just immense. It was going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. We couldn't raise enough money. We lost support. But there's so many other people out there that are still fighting for change for kids.
Hmm.
You mentioned is it your daughter?
Daughter. Yep.
Your daughter, may have some vaccine adverse reactions. Forcing this at the K through 12 level in California is just crazy. It's
Yeah.
lunacy. And once that, I think it's SB, is it 266?
Can't remember.
2018, 2019 went into play,
Yeah.
and it basically took away religious exemptions in California. So
Oh,
if you have any
wow.
religious beliefs, even
Yeah.
personal beliefs from vaccines, you can go get a medical one. But if you're a doctor in California, you write more than 4, they're going to take your license away and they're going to kick
Hmm.
you out of the medicine. And so PERC is an advocacy group that I'm working with that is fighting for kids. And you got firefighters, you got doctors, you got nurses, you got scientists, you got professors of public health policy like Jay.
Hmm.
You got all these people that opposed being forced and mandated to do something against their will, against their beliefs, against
Hmm.
their constitutional rights.
And in the end, you were right to.
And those rights were
Yeah.
taken away. They were trampled on. And there's still lawsuits going on.
No, but also just from a health standpoint, you were right. You were more right than the public health officials. This vaccine is not safe, and it was not effective. And so, we're seeing the extent by which it was unsafe. We're still learning about it. We have a long ways to go. And I think if we allowed ourselves to understand the mechanisms by which people are suffering long-term adverse reactions to the vaccine, we could come up with interventions. And, I know people that would be willing to, if there was a protocol on the market that was
A detoxifier.
widely, I mean, you can't, detox is a tough word, but yeah, if there's a way to, detox, they don't consider that like a scientific medical term. Detoxing is not real according to centralized medical advice.
True.
They say it's not a thing.
Not yet.
Not yet. But I wish that there was a place to go that wasn't just Peter McCullough's website, which is great, and I'm grateful he's doing it. But like a group of doctors coming together and forming a consensus on how to treat long-term injury due to the COVID-19 jab, right? Why can't we get there? We're not there yet. We're still a ragtag group because it's still being suppressed because folks like Senator Johnson can't get consensus in the Senate, or, folks like, I don't know, in the House, they can't get consensus. Like, so Congress is completely being unhelpful. And we could potentially save millions of people's lives if we came out clean about about all of this.
Right.
It is a prerequisite to helping millions of people restore their health.
I feel like the momentum again is shifting, right? The
Mhm.
conversations are being had. You go to the restaurant, you go to the park, you go to the
Mhm.
little league games, you go to the soccer field, and I since I know so much about what I fought for and behind the scenes and the medical
Mhm.
freedom movement and all the people that were censored, I'm hearing this every single day. Everyone's talking about so and so's got cancer, so and so's sick, so and so
Yes.
this, so and so that. It's so weird. They were so young, they died, they passed, and I'm just sitting there and I'm hurt.
Yeah.
I'm frustrated, and I'm hurt. And I think a lot of people believed in the messaging. I believe it was propaganda. But call me fringe, call me extreme, call me a kook. But I think that the machine told everybody it was okay, okay. And a lot of people, I think, were people believe in it. That's fine. And I do think that the COVID vaccines were created to save lives, the most vulnerable
Yeah.
populations, and they probably did, but nobody wants to look at the lives that were affected by it. And I'm not just talking about deaths or cancers or adverse medical reaction. I'm talking about, what about the financial impact? What about the mental
Right.
and physical and emotional health impact? What about the firefighters in San Francisco or LA that were terminated or fighting for their jobs back, or across the country, and nurses, doctors?
Yeah.
And there's so many people that lost their careers and their livelihood because they didn't want to comply with something that was, you know,
I think
it's
in
sad.
posterity, that would be forgivable. I think in posterity, what is unforgivable is that people are dying and they're suffering, and they're not dying, you know, comfortable end of life um, situations. They're dying in very painful, excruciating, intense suffering.
Yeah.
Like the amount of pain that these diseases are causing in the body are so extreme. I mean, it is a form of torture that it is a slow torture in some cases. It is a severe torture in almost all cases, how people are dying.
And I think as the conversation becomes more commonplace,
Hmm.
household, the brand, and people are to stop being afraid to speak up, especially the medical
Yeah.
establishment. Nobody wants to talk about it. I go around and around with, friends and family in a very peaceful, subtle way. And I've had to learn over the past 6 to 12 months to just not talk about it. And
Mm,
it tortures me inside. So I keep my mouth shut because I don't want to be the one
right.
screaming from the rooftops. And, more and more people are starting to say,
No,
hey, you,
culturally, it's so hard.
yeah.
It's
And
so hard because people are terrified of dying, and they're terrified of going into the hospital and being told they have cancer. Um,
I'm scared of it. I mean, in my line of work,
mhm.
COVID vaccines aside, like we have a much greater percentage of getting cancer.
I have another friend who has a brother and a father going through horrible cancer diagnoses,
Yep.
and other health issues as well in that family. And how do I talk to her about it? Like, even me in my situation, knowing what I know about all of that, can't have a conversation because it's too painful.
And it's not going to do anybody any good. It's so we have to rise above it. And
Call me naive, but I'm of the opinion that if we talk about these things in our moment of great despair, that we can help somebody else.
true.
Right? If we had more advocates coming out and saying, I am sick of losing my friends and family and the health of my community to this bullshit, it is time for us to get out there and use our voices and talk about what is happening here.
True. And I think that's part of the path of hopefully what can come from this relationship we're forging right now, getting the message out, but at the same time, more people join the movement, more people are okay accepting the, the truth and the realities of what may or
What's
may not be
happening.
happening. But
I don't understand how, again, going back to Steve, the signal is too strong.
yeah,
There is something happening right now.
yep. And it has to be acknowledged, it has to be recognized, and we have to come up with a plan. And I'm not stopping until the folks at the Capitol, the folks at the leadership of, my career, the International Association of Firefighters that, pushed hard in the paint. We're against mandates, but we think these vaccines are great. And then when people got mandated and lost their jobs, where were they? You're not a member of this organization anymore. I know, thank you for your 20, 25, 15, 5, 6, 10 years of service, but go find another department that'll hire you without a mandate. That was not okay. And so we need to hold people accountable. We all need to drop our gloves and stop fighting about it, right? I think it's going to be a generational problem, right? There's always going to be discernment and disagreement on it, but we need to affect change. And now's the time to, again, hold people accountable, get some transparency, get some data. If everyone thinks that it was so great and wonderful, it was safe and effective, and nobody was harmed by it.
We need some bravery. We need people to be brave and admit I was wrong.
I'm sitting right here. No,
Yeah.
we got the men and the women that.
Well, you were right
pushing.
all along. That's the thing. It really irks a part of the ego to be in front of somebody who was right all along, as you were, who looks somebody in the eye who is not just wrong, but then did some really terrible things. With bad information.
Right.
So, here we are. Well, thank you for your bravery. Thank you for your continued work. And, there's going to be lawsuits that some are not going to get us exactly where we want to be, but some are going to get us there. So,
there's some move. Like Bart just had a really big lawsuit that they won, some employees there. That's the Bay Area. That shattered the whole, the whole movement against the, anti-vaxxers. It was
and there was that woman who also just got like a $12 million settlement.
Yeah, I think she worked for Blue Shield or Blue Cross out of maybe Minnesota.
Yeah, and
massive
she's
settlement.
now a Congress. One of them also got fired from a job and is now a member of Congress. But
the truth is prevailing. The stories are coming out. The appellate courts in California have some cases, in California, just to get this message across. I hammer it. I know we're closing out here, but I networked with brothers and sisters in the fire service that I never would have known and forged what appears to be lifelong relationships, friendships, like family. And we went through the thick of it together. And, down to the South, Los Angeles firefighters were terminated.
Yeah.
Their rights were violated, Skelly rights, labor rights, same with San Francisco. And they're all fighting for their jobs back. And it's like, nothing's moving. The lawsuits are just, they're throwing everything on the wall to drag them out, to drain them of money, fiscally irresponsible for the taxpayers.
Well,
it has to stop.
An executive order from the governor could turn this around. So how about in 2026?
Yeah.
We get a message across.
We got a lot of work to do.
Definitely within the realm of possibility.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.